From then on, Alexander's loyal scribe Callisthenes would call his master a god on earth. And the Egyptians would reaffirm that notion, depicting his image on some of the most sacred temple walls. At Luxor, Alexander is shown with raised hands, worshipping his divine father, the god Ammon.
Being a deity, he was immune from criticism. He was on a different plane, a different plateau, and far superior.
But being a pharaoh, a living god, is not enough for Alexander. He is determined to defeat his archenemy Darius once and for all. While Alexander has been in Egypt, Darius has been amassing another army to take him on. In October 331 BC, one of the most decisive battles in history is fought in the heat and dust of Gaugamela, Persia, north of modern-day Baghdad. This time, Alexander is outnumbered more than 3 to 1. But he thrives on danger, and the challenge only seems to embolden him more. His men are almost completely surrounded by the Persian army, but his flanks hold the enemy long enough to see a gap open in the Persian lines. Alexander seizes the moment and breaks through to attack Darius. The Persian king flees once again. One of the secrets of Alexander's success on the battlefield is his use of the phalanx, a 16-deep formation of soldiers carrying long spears.
Alexander used a hammer and anvil technique with his phalanxes. His own phalanx, his Macedonian infantry, would form the anvil. And against the anvil, he would crush the enemy phalanx using the hammer, which is his companion cavalry. So the hammer and anvil was really a technique that he used time and again to be successful in battle.
Darius, who has fled east into the mountains, is eventually murdered by one of his officers. Three years after landing at Troy, Alexander is proclaimed Lord of Asia. He'd accomplished what his father planned to do but could not. While other great leaders would have been content with this monumental triumph, Alexander isn't. There is no turning back. In 329 BC, Alexander pushes on toward Afghanistan to conquer the eastern edge of the Persian Empire. Now he faces an even greater challenge, the forbidding mountains of the Hindu Kush. Rising 20,000 feet high, almost to the roof of the world, Alexander chooses one of the toughest routes for his 30,000-strong army.
During the going over the Hindu Kush, inclement weather, whether it was freezing rain, snow, blizzards, would have made things very difficult to impossible for anybody but Alexander the Great. At elevation, the oxygen is thinner. It takes a lot more effort to go a lot shorter distance at that elevation.
The pass is so narrow in places, the army marches in a single file that stretches for 10 miles. Alexander's iron determination is the only thing that keeps the men on the move.
That if you're going to accomplish great things with an army as an instrument, that army has to be absolutely willing to do whatever you ask them to do. And if you consider, even for a moment, what it was that Alexander asked his army to do, it was ludicrous. Why would they do that? Well, it's because they had an extremely tight bond with him.
But over time, this bond is put to the test. In order to add fresh troops to his army, Alexander recruits Persian soldiers to fill the ranks. This proves very unpopular with the Greeks.
I must stress this isn't just a military decision, it's also a social matter. When the day's over, they dismount, they walk into the tent to have a drink, and what do they find? They find an Iranian barbarian to them propping up the bar and having a drink in the same tent with them. They don't like it. Soldiers can be very racist.
their resentment grows worse as Alexander's character takes a dark turn. When the army reaches the fabled city of Samarkand, a lavish banquet is held. Alexander's erratic behavior is compounded by his bouts of heavy drinking, and alcohol seems to fuel his megalomania. One of the guests is Clitus, who served under Alexander's father Philip and saved Alexander's life in battle. As the wine flows, the mood turns ugly. Alexander begins boasting that his deeds are far more heroic than his father's. An angry Clitus listens in silence, then finally shouts out, "All your glory is due to your father." A drunk Alexander seizes a spear, kills his friend, and collapses in tears.
What upset Alexander, particularly by what Clitus said, was really two sorts of things. One, that Philip was much more important than Alexander was allowing to appear. In other words, Alexander's propaganda machine had gone into overdrive, and he, Alexander, had done it.
What Alexander wants now is all-consuming control over his men.
He wanted the men and the officers to bow down, blow him a kiss. The officers would then be given a kiss in return to show they were his social equals. The Macedonians didn't want anything to do with kissing.
To the Greeks, only the gods should be worshipped like this. Many refused to obey Alexander. One of them is Callisthenes, the man who had created the myth of Alexander.
And Callisthenes thought this was slavish, this was barbarian, this was a betrayal of Greek custom. And he thought that Alexander now was becoming an outright tyrant and a despot.
A ruthless Alexander has Callisthenes tortured and killed.
The Alexander probably became a victim of his own success. And maybe he internalized more than ever, increasingly more of his own deity, his own megalomania. And after a while, those feelings of grandeur probably influenced the way he conducted his campaigns and interacted with his soldiers.
By the 8th year of his campaign, Alexander has conquered Egypt, Persia, and the peoples of Central Asia. Alexander's empire stretched from Greece to Afghanistan and covered nearly 2 million square miles. Now he heads farther east to the ends of the known world, where the exotic and mysterious land of India lies.
He would have gone east. This is the route, the invasion route that the Persians used to conquer their part of India. As heir to the Persian Empire, he wanted that, so he went the route of armies before him and armies certainly after him through the Khyber Pass.
Alexander arrives in a place of such mystery, all the rules have changed. He is confronted by a powerful Raja who is determined to stop him. The Indians have amassed an army of 50,000 men, and they have a terrifying new weapon: 200 war elephants. At 9 feet high and weighing up to 5 tons, elephants were the battle tanks of ancient warfare. They could charge their enemy and trample them underfoot. Alexander quickly realizes he cannot risk a head-on attack against such a massive force.
He has this ability to plan and size up the distribution and space, to always maintain an element of deception about his own intentions, move to the right when he's actually going to cut to the left, feint a sham crossing of the river in India, and then cross at a point where they're not expecting.
With this surprise attack, Alexander's men used their long spears to rile the elephants.
In the middle were the elephants being enraged by the spears and the arrows that were piercing their hides. Now, in that situation, the elephants, frenzied with fear and pain, turned on the Indians as much as they turned on the Greeks.
After one of the toughest battles of Alexander's career, the Indian army is wiped out and the Raja surrenders. But in a surprising move, Alexander is so impressed by his bravery, he gives the Raja back his kingdom. The legend of Alexander is now firmly rooted in Indian soil.
Alexander the Great lives on in India in many different ways. Indians view Alexander as this great heroic character who pervades their entire sense of history. Now you see Alexander's legacies kind of come through in pretty much everything that India has done. It's very much evident in Indian literature, in Indian sculpture and paintings. So even today you go to Northwest India and you'll see Indian gods striking Grecian poses because these were, the sculptors were influenced by Greek art.